Gus's premise starts with the neoliberalism that frames the structure and orientation of schooling and education operates within a one-size-fits-all model while simultaneously cultivating the cult of individualism. So this is framing the speech within the framework, basically, of neoliberalism. Consequently, there is not an acceptance that generations of school leavers since Butler and the 1944 Act have been portrayed by the system on the axis of race and class, principally, as well as gender and disability, stroke learning disability. So Ofsted says of itself, Ofsted exists to raise standard, improve the lives for all. We put children and learners who face barriers to their learning and or well-being at the heart of what we do. That's our mission. And focusing wholly on the diversity of content, Becky Francis of the Education Endowment Foundation states that one of our strengths as a nation is our diversity and our commitments to equality of opportunity and fairness. As such, we shall seek to ensure that all young people are able to feel included and engaged in the national curriculum as set out in our terms of reference. The review will seek to deliver a curriculum that reflects the issues and diversities of our society, ensuring all children and young people are represented and also exposed to a wide range of perspectives that serve to broaden their horizons. But neither the national curriculum as it is now, nor what it will be when Frances and her team is done with it, let alone what Ofsted says, begins to address the fundamental flaws in the system. So again, the premise is that the system needs to change to allow Ofsted to do its job better, but then Ofsted would have to change in the light of the changes to the national curriculum and the system. It's a part of the same package. Reviewing this year's GCSE results for the Sutton Trust, Kevin Latham, the Trust's Research and Policy Manager, observed that the overwhelming message from this week's GCSE results is perhaps steady as we go, with the positives and negatives that come with that. However, this reassuring consistency and stability hides structural inequalities in our education system that few seem willing to address. He went on to evidence that as follows. This week's results also offer a glimpse at some of the less spoken about and hidden structural inequalities in our education system. The results for post-16 GCSEs, which include 17-plus-year-old pupils retaking their GCSEs, so students who didn't achieve the standard of 4 in English and maths at 16, are striking. Only 28.6 of our 17-plus-year-old pupils passed with a grade 4 or higher, barely 1 in 4. For maths, this pass rate was just 18.2%. In 2025, down from 18.6% in 2024. For English literature, it was down to 23.8% from 25.4%. And for English language, the figure was barely changed at 23.1%, marginally up from 22.9%. The majority of these candidates will be retake pupils who we know to be more likely to come from disadvantaged backgrounds. This means that barely 1 in 5 English and maths retake pupils pass. Becky Francis writes about the correlation between children seeing themselves represented in the curriculum and their attainment levels, as if this is a new revelation. It's what we've been saying for 60 years and what propelled people like John LaRose and Jessica Huntley to establish their respective bookshops in 1966 and 1968, respectively. It informed approaches to multicultural education and our successful efforts to move away from multicultural to anti-racist curricula in schooling and education. NAME morphed from the National Association for Multicultural Education to the National Anti-Racist Movement in Education, and we established anti-racist teacher education networks, ARTEN, in most urban centres in Britain. What both France's review and Ofsted, even if its new framework will roll out starting this Thursday, failed to address the fact that, A, it is not just a question of ensuring that all young people are able to feel included and engaged in the national curriculum on the axis of class and economic dispossession, as of race and belonging. It is a matter of young people being able to feel included and engaged in the society. Young people experience the society differently, not least on account of how the society defines them, and to the extent to which they feel included, marginalised, or enjoy a sense of belonging, irrespective of race, social class, gender, or learning difficulties. That was B. C. In a liberal democratic society, every parent and every child has a right to know what the state considers the purpose and function of schooling and education to be. And D. I would like to think that a social contract which establishes a relationship between the individual, society and the economy would look something like this. 1. Education is a fundamental right. It is not a privilege to be granted on the basis of social class, racial or ethnic origin, wealth, religion, age, sex, or physical ability. Education is for life, and as such, it should be possible for individuals to key in and out of education at all ages of their life. 2. Education is not just for skilling people for the workplace. It is for developing in people the social skills and competencies to take control of their own lives and to function as responsible citizens, demanding and safeguarding their own rights and having due regard and respect to the rights of others. Whatever effectively denies access to education for individuals in society effectively denies them their fundamental human right and contributes to their oppression. 3. Education and schooling should be about, among other things, assisting disadvantaged groups in society and people in general in understanding the roots and the persistence of racial and social injustice and providing them with the individual and collective tools with which to combat both. D. Curriculum, pedagogy and assessment of schooling outcomes, defined as much more than test and examination results, must reflect these fundamental principles and be geared towards these goals. If schooling and education are to serve the society by developing holistic individuals who are at ease with themselves and people who don't look like them and are imbued with a sense of societal purpose. So when Ofsted says it exists to raise standards and improve lives for all, it ought to be inspecting the extent to which schooling and education are fulfilling these functions. This means that government, schools and Ofsted need to ensure that legislation is aligned with these objectives and that compliance requirements with respect to one tranche of legislation does not conflict with that of others, or with statutory guidelines that are geared towards delivering government expectations that are contrary to the letter and spirit of the legislation. A classic example is schools' failure to operate in accordance with the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child. School exclusion guidelines and practices invariably run contrary to these rights, as well as to the requirements of the Equality Act of 2010. It is extraordinary that at a time when the nation is witnessing a resurgence of neo-fascism and overt and violent displays of anti-blackness, matched by a steady increase in racist incidents in schools and perpetuated by school-aged children in communities, the government's curriculum and assessment review, as well as Ofsted's revised framework, will have nothing to say about the implications of that for curriculum and pedagogy and schooling and education generally. It doesn't matter how tightly Nigel Farage and Reform seek to stick their fingers in the dike. The hard truth is that, ending indefinite leave to remain or not, the demography of Britain will continue to change inexorably. The question is, what relationship does the state expect the black and global majority population to have with the society of which they are becoming a far larger part? And how is schooling and education preparing all the nation's children, especially those in monoracial hinterlands, to understand Britain's past and develop and equip themselves to build a more equitable future, a future not marred by the toxicity of racism?